and talk about growing them too. So that's super fun. How many people out here have a garden for cutting, or maybe in the past? Just with a show of hands. So exciting. Is there anyone that's growing on a larger scale, perhaps, on a farm or maybe for a business? Nope. Okay. The reason why I asked is when I first started out in this venture, the first thing I realized was how great this community is. Flower farmers are the most generous people. They are so willing to share their information, tell you what's working for them, what's not working for them, and overall they just lend their support. And so everything that I'm going to share with you today, I've learned from seasoned growers. And honestly, we're a community right here today. You're out here because you love flowers too. And so I encourage you, talk to one another. There's things that you're learning along the way. We all become better growers by sharing our information. So I have this class set up kind of as a crash course from the perspective of flower farming, just because flower farmers, they have to be so efficient. And I kind of feel like it doesn't matter if you have a big garden or a small garden, efficiency is really a good thing. So we're going to look at everything from a broad perspective, and so that we can get an idea of like the overall process. And like all good stories, we have to start at the beginning, but in the end you can decide what things you kind of want to delve into further, or rabbit holes that you want to go into, because there's many in this field. And you can decide what you want to leave out. And even if you decide at the end of the day, I'm just not ready to start this process yet, don't worry, I have an excellent way that you can still be surrounded by flowers in your life. So to start in the beginning, we have to have a plan. And I call it the master plan. And there's a few non-negotiables in this plan. When you're siting, scoping out your site, you have to have sun. A minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sun. It's just so important. And when you're looking at your sun, pay attention to the time of year that you're doing that, because if you're out in early spring and your trees haven't leafed out yet, it's gonna look like you have a lot more sun than you do. And also, take a look at the trees surrounding your property. Get to know what their mature height is. That's really important, because as they grow, that canopy of shade is gonna grow. And we've actually had that situation out here. This bed over here sat in full glorious sun, and then over the years those trees kept growing, and we called it creeping shade. And every year we just saw our vegetable plants were just struggling to grow. And so our only option was to create a whole other bed, which is what we have behind here. And so if there's one thing as a new grower that I can encourage you, is really spend some time researching how much sun you're going to get now and 10 years from now, because it's a lot of work and labor to move the bed. The other thing that you want to have is good drainage. There's very few plants that want to have soggy feet. So I highly suggest after a really bad rainstorm, you go out and make sure you have no standing water where you want to be growing. And then you're also going to need a water source. You want a water source nearby. Like we have one actually right in between our beds, but it's just not realistic to think you're going to be filling buckets of water up and trying to water your plants that way. And then there's wildlife. There is nothing more heartbreaking than starting your plants from seed, growing them all summer long, and then right before they're ready to bloom, the deer come and eat every single one of your sunflower heads off. And we've had that happen here, and I want to cry. So in your master plan, you want to make sure you have some way to protect your plants from wildlife. And then soil. It's so important to grow your soil first. We're asking a lot from our annual plants. We're asking them to go from seed to a mature plant and then produce multiple stems of flowers for us. So the best thing we can do is give them a good environment to grow in. And so I highly suggest that you do a soil test, and the extension office can definitely help you with that. But what it's going to do is it's going to tell you what's missing in your soil, so that you're not blindly adding things that you don't actually need. And then I'm going to put some buzzwords out here for you: compost and cover crops. It's a whole other rabbit hole you can go down. We have classes on it, but they are really your best teammates out in the garden with you. They're really going to encourage that microbial bacteria, which is then going to help compete against those pathogens. And we're really lucky today, because if that's something that you're interested in or have been struggling with, we have a soil expert here, and that's Thomas. So definitely after this class, if you've got questions, reach out to him. But always think about growing your soil first. And then there's some questions that you want to ask and include in your master plan. The biggest thing that I was told was start small. Most flower farms fail because they just start too big too fast. They become overwhelmed, they can't keep up with the harvest, flowers are blowing in the field. So it's just a good idea to start small. Like your master plan, your overall plan, if you have a large space to grow, can be big, but maybe start in phases within that plan and ask yourself, how much help are you going to have? And I say how much actual help are you going to have? Because there's lots of people in the spring, they're so excited and they're like, oh, I want to be around flowers. And then it gets hot and humid and it's August and it's not fun to wake up at 6 a.m. or we're going on vacation. I mean, life just happens and then you're the only one out there, which is fine. But the whole point is to enjoy the process. So starting small allows you to assess really how much actual help you had. How did it go for you? Maybe you need to decrease the size. Maybe you can stay the same, or maybe you want to get bigger. But that's a way to actually have a realistic idea of how you should be growing. And then also your goals. You really want to think about your goals. And this is important because when it is hot and humid, it's always good to have your why. So when you're out there and you're like, why am I doing this? You can go back to what your goals were. So if you're new and you just want to have some flowers around your house, or maybe you are ready to share with your friends and family, or maybe you're ready to take that leap and start a business. These are good questions to have answered. And then finally, what can you afford, right? All hobbies and businesses, they cost money. So it's a good idea to sit down with yourself and kind of have a good idea of what it is that you want to spend on this venture. And that way, when those seed catalogs start coming in and you're super excited and you're watching the dollar signs increasing in that, cart, that shopping cart, you can go back to your master plan, look at what your budget is, and rein yourself in. So the master plan is always fluid, but it's great to start with that. And then speaking of the seed catalogs, I really feel like it's a great idea to just make a wish list. Don't worry about how much space you have. You're going to be exposed to so many different flowers just by talking to people, through the seed catalogs, through social media. Just make a list of what it is you would like to grow. You're not going to grow them all in one season, but maybe you're going to be growing them in a couple of seasons. It just keeps things exciting and takes that pressure off. And it's also narrowing down your list from when all those seed catalogs start pouring in. You're now just looking at your wish list. But a couple of things with that. Make sure you're looking at varieties that are good for cut flowers. There's so many varieties of like zinnias and dahlias that they're bred small. They're bred for containers or like the front of your bedding plants. So you're looking for plants that are going to grow 18 to 24 inches tall, or even taller. You're looking for those long stems. And then also consider, what colors and textures that you want to be surrounded around, and be thinking of that when you're making your wish list. One of a local flower farmer gave me the best advice, and she said, think of when you're selecting your flowers as like a recipe, and group colors that go well together. And that was a game changer for me, because when I first started out, I was just picking whatever I loved, which is great, but when it came time to make bouquets, it was a little bit like a circus. I feel like they were still pretty, but not cohesive. So really, by having that color palette, things really started to come together better. So just something to think about. So you're going to set that wish list aside, and then it's time to really start sketching things out. So you're going to be sketching out your beds and the paths. And so there's some tips with that. You don't want the width of your bed to be any more than 4 feet across. And that's so that you can easily reach into the center of the bed from either side without stepping into your bed. You never want to step into your beds because you don't want to compact that soil. And then also, you're not reaching so far in that you're like crushing the plants in front of you. So even my beds at home are 3 feet, and it's wonderful. It's easy on the back. And if you have the space, I would make the length of your beds all the same length. We have our beds at 100 feet out here, and that's from an efficiency standpoint. That means that all your technical stuff, like your landscape fabric, your netting, your drip irrigation, all of that's going to be the same length, so that way come the end of the season when you're rolling stuff up, you're not having to label this is for bed A, this is for bed B. You know it's all interchangeable. So it just makes it just simplifies the process. And then there's something else that you need to be researching when you're picking out your plants, and that's plant spacing. The main plant spacing is 6 inches apart, 9 inches apart, and 12 inches apart. And then we have 18 to 24 inches apart. And that's reserved more for like your bigger bush plants or your vining plants. But if you're small, like we're just small out here, and you don't have a lot of space, just know that most annual plants are spaced at 9 by 9 inches apart. So our landscape fabric has holes in it, and that's how they're spaced out. So the next thing that you want to be thinking of is your seed sowing schedule. You've got everything laid out, you know how many beds you have, so it's really time to take that wish list and you're going to narrow down what you're going to grow. And there's some things that you need to have a good understanding of, and it was a game changer for me, and this is a way that you can have flowers from very early spring all the way through the fall. And that's getting to know the difference between a cool season plant and a warm season plant. That's what annuals, they fall into 2 different categories. And just so that we're on the same page, an annual plant is a plant that grows and dies in the same season, unlike a perennial that will die back in the winter but then come back again. So all the plants that I'm growing out here, I'm treating them as annual plants. And a cool season plant, its life cycle is basically, it likes the cold weather. As soon as it starts getting hot, it's not going to perform well for you and it's going to die back. And then your warm season, or tender annuals, it's referred to as a lot, you have to protect that from frost. As soon as it gets cold, they're done. So the happy time is when, like early July, end of June, when the two mix, and then your bouquets are like incredible, right? Because you have from both seasons. So there's lots of books out there. This one is a great one, and I listed in your resource. But the thing I learned the most is that when you're doing your research, you can actually do something called fall planting. Everything's based on your growing zone. So we're zone 7. So any plants that fall below our zone, like 6, 5, 4, they're really hardy. They're going to do great here. And you can actually start growing them now and then get them out in the fall. And like Sweet William is an excellent example. I fall planted that. I did nothing to it. I'm not encouraging that, by the way, but I really did nothing to it. And I mean, it snowed on it. We had some really, very cold weather. And I thought, okay, well, we're going to see what happens. And they just did great. I mean, they were my earliest bloomers. And so you can succession plant, you can start those in the fall, but then I did another batch, in early winter. I started in January and then got another crop out of planting. So it's just something to think about, your cool season and your warm season. And that's going to determine how you plan out your seed sowing schedule, because your cool season flowers, you're going to be starting those in January, like that end of January. And your warm season plants, you're going to be starting more in April. You're kind of waiting for that frost to get out of here. This is my plug for seed starting. I didn't do it, and then once I started, I'm totally addicted to it. It is the lifeblood of a flower farmer. There are so many different varieties that you get to grow when you start from seed that you cannot find in the big box stores and even your specialty stores. They're catering for pots and bedding plants. So seed starting is definitely the way to go. You don't need a greenhouse, and you only need a little small space. Like I have a Costco wire rack, and I use chains and shop lights. And I just have this happy little space in my house that I get to go down to in February and see plants like this growing. It is so awesome. You can, if you're a large scale, you can use cell trays like this, which is going to take up more space. If you're a smaller grower, like out here, we're constantly starting sunflowers because they're a one and done plant. So I just have this little cells that's just 12 cells. It just came so awesome. You can start them in here. You water it from the bottom when they're first germinating. It even has a dome and a little air thing. So there's ways to kind of stay smaller if you need to. And then I'm going to put a plug in for soil blocking. A lot of flower farmers do this. It's this little tool. You use a soil block medium. I'm going to be honest with you, there's recipes out there where you can make your own, but because I'm so small scale, I just bought the medium, so I don't even know exactly what's all in it. But there is 20 cells in here, and you stick it in the soil, and then you put it on the tray. And so on a tray like this, you can get 40 plants. I mean, how cool is that? So imagine how many plants you could be filling, you know, on your racks. How many different varieties of plants.
Do you want me to pass that around?
Yep. And this is what I'm talking about when, as far as like really awesome special varieties. This is basil. It's dark opal. I highly doubt I would be able to find that in a big box store, but just look at the richness of that color. How fun in fall is that going to be next to like bright orange, right? And then these are zinnias, different varieties of zinnias. But I just wanted to show that you really don't need a lot of space to grow. And definitely seed starting is something to try. One of the things that was a little blurry for me when I first started seeds is that some seeds need light to germinate and some need darkness. So that's not always listed on the seed packet. So just do your research, and all that means is either you're putting a little bit of soil on top of it or you're just firming the seed on top. So just a little plug so that you know. And then the other thing you want to be researching is the growth habit of the plants that you're buying, because that's going to determine how many seeds you want to buy. So our sunflower plants, they're single stemmed, meaning that they're going to grow, I'm going to cut it, and that plant is done. So I'm going to buy more seeds for sunflowers because I'm starting sunflowers every 7 to 10 days and planting them out. Whereas there's some things that, you know, they have like a long lifespan, like statice. You know, I can plant that in the fall, or in the fall actually, grow it through all the way through, and it's still blooming even in the summer. So it has a long time. So I'm not having to buy a ton of seed like that. And then there's kind of like, you know, ones that pop up quick and then they're gone in a flash, like baby breath like that. So I can succession plant those. And I do 3 sowings of zinnia seeds. You know, they're going to keep on producing for me, but I've noticed like they get kind of powdery mildew and they're just performing less. So by having a fresh batch going, I planted one in May and then my next batch was in June. And you can see the difference when you go into the garden. The one that I planted in June is still fresh, and then I have another batch going. So just be researching, you know, the growth habit of the plant, if it's going to be a one and done or shoot up quick, or if it has a long harvest period. That's going to help you manage how many seeds you should be buying. And then take detailed notes. I say every year, I will remember this. I will go back inside and I will write this down, and you know, the kids, whatever, things happen and I don't. And then when I'm working on my master plan, I can't remember anything. So I'm being better about that, but just label everything, take notes. It's really going to help you fine tune your plan, which is going to help save you money, and it's going to help save time. So now you've started your seeds, right? They're growing and everything, and it's getting exciting because they're going to be ready to go out in the garden soon. So you want to be setting up your beds. And I'm so fortunate out here. I'm surrounded by just awesome people, and we have one person that kind of handles all of our technical stuff, and I was hoping he would be here today, but his name is Patrick, and he handled all of our landscape and our drip irrigation. And so I highly recommend. I have beds at home that do not have landscape fabric, and the amount of time that I spend weeding is ridiculous. And I think I've only, thanks Thomas, weeded these beds initially when I first put the transplant in. They'll get like a couple little weeds and I just pluck them out, and that's it. It is such a game changer with your time. And he's like so talented. He made a template that was 9 inches by 9 inches apart, and the holes were offset, and burned fabric for us all the way down. So I'm not that talented at home, and I did find a place, it's called gardenmats.com, that has landscape fabric with pre-burned holes. It's more for vegetable plants, so the plant spacing is not offset, but it's still helping me manage those weeds. So just an option if you don't want to be discouraged, right? So you're laying your drip irrigation down, and then you're laying your landscape fabric down, and then you're ready to start transplanting. And so the biggest thing that you have to remember is that you have to harden your plants off first. just think about how they've been in this nice little cozy environment in your house, no fluctuating temperatures, no storms, and no scorching sun. So the worst thing we could do is just take it out and plop it right in the field. They're just not gonna make it. So they kind of have to be handled like babies. And I put mine out on my front porch where it's protected, it gets morning sun, and it's not a wind tunnel. And you're just gradually acclimating it to its new environment. So once they've hardened off, they're ready to go into the field. And I found that actually using a little butter knife is like the best thing. I mean, you just pull the soil away and plop it in. And the great thing about soil blocks is they're kind of, I mean, you just rip the little block apart and plop it right in. So it's really easy. So after you've got them all planted, you still want to protect them. And we use row cover, which is just this lightweight permeable fabric, which lets the water and the sun still come through, but it helps with fluctuating temperatures, it helps make the sun not so intense, and it protects your plants from critters. Birds love to just pull out those new baby starts. So I usually put this on for 2 weeks, and I use these hoops. So it makes like a low tunnel, and I'm either securing it with rocks, or you can do like bags of soil, anything to just hold it down so that the wind doesn't open it. As a cost-saving tip, like this was a Christmas gift, so. But out here, we got thin-walled PVC piping, which is a lot less expensive, and it just bends, and we're able to just stick those right into the ground, and then we put the row cover and secure it that way. So just a little cost-saving technique. The next thing that you're going to do is let your plants grow. You're going to have that on for like 2 weeks, and you're going to be watching the weather, especially for your tender annuals. There were so many times that I looked at the weather and I had to race out here and cover up the plants because we had temperatures nearing frost after Mother's Day. So May was a lot of running out here and putting this back up. So again, it's just a way to protect your plants. So after the row cover comes off, the next thing you're going to do is net your plants. And netting is so important. Things like Snapdragons, they want to grow and then take a little turn and then grow again. And so netting kind of helps keep your plants grow straight, and also helps support them from, storms and winds so that they're not breaking. And we use T-post out here, but another cost-saving thing that you can do is use like wooden stakes. That's just a little bit cheaper. But you're gonna net your plants, and you're gonna net them at half the height of their mature growth. Okay, so like my ideal beds would be every bed was its own variety, but that's not realistic in my life. So we have plants intermixed within the same bed, and I think a lot of people are like that. So the challenge with netting becomes how you're netting when you have big plants and small plants, and some of the big plants grow up, and then it's moving the netting. So you're kind of always adjusting, but just something to be aware of. But definitely net your plants. Okay, I skipped something that's really important. So before you net your plants, and sometimes you've netted your plants, but you still need to go back and do this, you have to do something that's so crazy. That's probably why I skipped it, because you've worked so hard to grow your plants. They get to be about 12 inches tall, and you have to do something crazy. You've got to go in on your plant and cut off the top 3 to 4 inches right below a set of leaves. Like you can see another little flower is coming out here, and you're going to snip it. And it's heartbreaking. Like you're like, what? I've waited so long for it to get big. But it's so important to do, because what this tells the plant is that, okay, I'm going to send more shoots out and longer stems. And you will get so many more flowers. But the thing is you still have to do your research, because you're not doing it on every single plant. You're only doing it on plants that are multi-branching. I would never pinch back my single stem sunflowers or stock, anything that's one and done. But like dahlias, it's really important to pinch the center out of your dahlias, because what happens is you'll get this massive stalk, and it's like a broomstick. You just can't even do anything with it. So by pinching out that center stem, you're going to have all of these nice size branches that you can use in bouquets and stuff. So pinching is so important, but make sure you're researching. Like celosia is a great example. You're gonna pinch celosia, except for the Bombay series. That's like the brain one. You wouldn't pinch that. So it's just good to understand and to do that research, and just know it is so heartbreaking, but it makes a huge difference. Another thing to understand about pinching is that you're doing it early in the season. Like I have some zinnias out there that would be ready to pinch right now, but I'm pushing the envelope with frost, right? So my goal isn't to get as many stems. My goal is to just keep having flowers come. So pinching delays the start of your flowers, and so you want to not pinch later in the season because you're just going for those flowers. Okay, so we talked about pinching and netting, and now it's super exciting because it's time to harvest. So that means all your hard work is paid off because you have flowers in the field to harvest. And what's really exciting when you're starting things from, seed, varieties that you've never had before, and all you've seen are them in pictures. How awesome is it to go into your garden and finally get to see it in person? So I highly suggest bring your camera out because you'll just be taking pictures left and right. But when it comes to harvesting, everything has to be clean. You're gonna go out with a bucket, and every flower farmer has said you should be able to drink out of that bucket. Like I am constantly scrubbing my buckets, keeping my pruners clean, and well, I would say my gloves, but they don't look so clean. But you're just trying to prevent bacteria from getting into that water and clogging up your stems. These are fresh flowers. It's very different from flowers that are flown all across the world. Those stems are basically clogged, so they don't take up water, but these guys need to drink. So the whole point is to keep things clean, to keep bacteria away. In my buckets, you don't have to do this. I have found that it works really well, but it's the CVBN tablet, and it's like a conditioning tablet, and it just helps keep that water clean and prevents no bacteria from forming. So it's like a holding solution. If I can't get to my arrangements in 2 days, my flowers are still going to be, fresh. So you're going to come out with, clean buckets, and then I always come out with, another bucket because I need to strip the leaves. You want to only come out in the morning, like very early in the morning or in the evening. Harvesting in the middle of the day is a no-go. Your flowers will just not recover. And it's crazy. Like if I'm out here at 6 a.m. harvesting basil, no problem. I can get it in my bucket and it stays all nice and perky. If I go home and start harvesting my basil at 10 a.m., it's wilted and it takes a while for it to recover. So early is better, and honestly, it's such a beautiful time to be in the garden early in the morning. It's wonderful. So that's my pep talk, to get out there early. But the other research that you're doing is understanding the stage of what's the best stage to harvest your plants. And every plant is different. It can be really overwhelming. But again, these are all things that you're going to be researching along the way. And the reason why we're looking at this so broadly is because there's so many plants out there that we can't talk about each plant, but we can learn the questions we need to ask so that we can inform ourselves how to go about. So like zinnias, you've probably heard of the wiggle test. This flower can look like it's ready, but on zinnias, it's the craziest thing. You want to go a few inches down the plant, and if it's wobbly, it's not ready. The stem will just be really weak, and it will always break when you put it into your arrangement. So when you wiggle it, it should be nice and firm, and that's how you know that it's ready. And then you're going to go deep into the plant. You're always cutting above, like there was another set of leaves here, but you're cutting above a set of leaves, and then you're going to just strip your plant, and then you're going to place it right in the water. And that's really the process. It's not always possible, but you don't want your bucket sitting out in full sun. So we'll talk about a couple of the stages. I mean, it would be impossible to talk about everything, but here's some Snapdragons. I left these in the field. This is a cool season plant. They are so gorgeous in the spring, but as it starts getting hot and humid, you'll see the stems are just kind of, real skinny. They're not growing tall. I mean, they're struggling. They don't like the hot weather. But when you harvest them, you're just waiting for the bottom flowers to open, and that's it. That's the best harvest stage, because you don't want those pollinators to come and start pollinating the flower. That's what's going to decrease your vase life. So it's so fun in the arrangements to then just start watching all these guys open up. But you're going to cut deep all the way, right to the ground, and then you would strip your leaves, and then you would put it in the water. And the reason why you're stripping the leaves out in the field is because that's less plant material that this flower has to work on to rehydrate. So you're just trying to go for the flowers. You want the plants to have it as easy as possible, right? Cosmos, I love them, and then I'm frustrated with them. This is like so gorgeous, right? It's not the stage to harvest it at. 2 days in the vase at most, right? So you're trying to harvest it at this cracking bud stage. And so again, it's a lot of learning, but a general rule of thumb is that you want your plants to be a third to a halfway open. Okay, that's when you're trying to harvest it. Sunflowers, I mean, they're so gorgeous, right? I mean, look at this guy. Love it, but not when you harvest it. It's just when the petals are, you're just starting to see them, so it's completely closed up. But boy, in that vase, when it starts to open up, it's like magic. So again, just learning the different stages. This is Jewels of Opar. This was a new to me plant. That wish list I was talking about, there's plants that you're gonna just cross off, you're never gonna grow again. And then there's plants that you're gonna wanna grow all the time. And for me this year, this was this plant. It is gorgeous in the garden. It's that first plant right there. And we can walk the garden later, but it has chartreuse leaves, so it looks gorgeous in the bed. It has long stems, like look at this, and then it'll flower. It has these dainty little pink flowers, right? And then we're actually not even going for the flowers, even though they're gorgeous. Those flowers drop off, and then you get like this cranberry jewels. And it just is what provides air into your bouquet and just makes you want to reach out and touch it. So again, it's knowing the stage, because you would think you would be harvesting for the little pink flowers, but you're actually not. So research the stage, best stage to harvest in. And then after you've stripped your flowers, you put them in water, they have to do something called rest, which is awesome. I take all my buckets, I bring them into my basement, and I just leave them alone. It's nice and cool down there. They need to rehydrate. It takes about 3 to 4 hours, and I usually leave mine overnight, and that way I'm refreshed from harvesting, my flowers are refreshed, and in the morning, it's super fun to go start making bouquets, right? So rest your flowers. You want to be harvesting at least once a week. The whole goal of an annual plant is to grow, set seed, and die. And so by harvesting, we keep fooling that plant and saying, nope, you haven't set seed yet. And it's like, oh my gosh, I need to set seed. And so it puts up another flower for you. So if you don't harvest continually, it's just your garden's done. And then we talked about succession planning, how, I started zinnias a month apart. And then the other thing we need to talk about is bugs. They can be frustrating. Our Snapdragons, unfortunately, there's this variety of stink bug, and they just love them, and it drives me insane. But we do not use any chemicals or pesticides out here. What we use is something called a bad bug swimming pool. And the joke out here is there's never a lifeguard on duty. It's just a plastic jar, some water, and a bit of dish soap, and I'm hand picking those bugs off. And it works. It's a little bit time consuming, but it really decreases the population. I'm looking for all the different stages of the bug. I'm looking for their eggs. They're all going in here. And it does work, guys. And the thing is that, we're talking about flowers that we're cutting and bringing into our home, and we really don't want to use pesticides and chemicals. Like, we don't want that in our home. So always be thinking of the least toxic method when it comes to, well, your garden in general, and that also will play back into your soil health. So that's something that's really important. So now we're coming close to the end, which is the best part, right? We get to make bouquets and arrangements and share our flowers. It's so awesome. So again, we're going to start with everything being clean. Clean water, clean snips. I actually have snips that are specific for my flower arranging, so that I'm just not bringing anything that might be not wanted into my house or on my flowers. And I have different gloves too. And I'm going to put a plug in for Floral Food. Again, these are fresh flowers. So Floral Food has sugar in it, so it's going to be feeding your flowers, and it also has things in it that are going to help keep that bacteria out of the water, and it's just going to make your bouquets last so much longer. So I highly recommend it. And I know there's recipes online too, as a cost-saving measure, that you can kind of create your own solution too. The other thing you want to make sure is that when you're doing your arrangement, you have no leaves below the water line. So you're, again, stripping anything out, because anything that's sitting in that water is just going to encourage bacteria to grow. And then there's just ingredients that you want to strive for that kind of makes bouquets a little bit easier, and that's like your focal flower. So like the Benary's Giants, the Zinnias, that's a great focal flower. You're going to use your spikes like your celosia, and then you have like the supporting flowers, and so Zinnias also have a lot of like their smaller flowers, and then you'll have your fillers. One thing about fillers, that's the thing I struggle the most with actually, because it can take up a lot of space, but it's so important to the bouquet. It's really what's going to like plump up your bouquet. It's hard to like add a ton of flowers, but like this is considered a filler. This is amaranth. I mean, look at it, it's like crazy, right? And another thing about bugs, when you go out into the garden, our amaranth is riddled with the cucumber beetle. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. I'm having a hard time staying on top of it. They're my least favorite bug, if you've ever heard my bug talk. But the great thing about it is I'm only going for these tassels, and I'm stripping all the leaves, and the cucumber beetles love the leaves. So I've taken all the leaves off. You would never know once it's in the vase that I was having that problem. So just, you know, something to know. And then my favorite part of the bouquet is the air, right? These are the little twinkly bits, the things that make you want to just reach out and touch it. This is baby's breath, but again, just like the jewels of Opar. So those are kind of like the ingredients. So when you're thinking about, you know, your wish list, be thinking about those ingredients too. And I tried to make a chart for you too of what we've done out here that kind of breaks down. It shows you that it's a recipe, like the jewel tone, and then what each one of the flowers are as far as a focal or a spike or the air. But I got all of this from Florette. I'm sure probably a lot of you have heard from her, but if you haven't, look her up. She's just has changed the cut flower industry, and she is so generous with her information. She's a seed company, but she's also an educational company. And I mean, they truly are generous. Like, I've gotten personal emails when I've reached out to them. So they just, it's great. So everything that I got, she took the guesswork out for me, because I got them as like a seed packet for this recipe. So if you're just starting out and feeling overwhelmed, all the guesswork's taken away from you. And then as you continue to grow and you get more confident, you can be creating your own recipes. So if this is all a lot and you're like, okay, I'm just not ready to grow right now, or say you don't have sun, I'm going to put a plug in for supporting your local farmer. That is the best way that you can be surrounded around flowers, fresh flowers that showcase that, you know, sense of season and time and place. And it's so much fun. I listed on the resources a grower. She's called Bloom Flower Farm, and I'm telling you, if you don't have fields of flowers to walk through, just go see her stand. It's adorable. It will bring you so much joy. And I actually stopped and picked up some bouquets from there, so you can see like all the fun detail that she puts in. They're wrapped, have her sticker. I mean, fun, right? That you get to bring home. So in my opinion, a lot more fun doing that than going to the grocery store. I don't like going to the grocery store. So support your local flower farmer. Even if you grow flowers, just support them. It's a lot of hard work.
Excuse me, what is that beautiful little globe-shaped one there?
This is Gumfrina.
Gumfrina.
Yeah. So, and it works great as a dried flower too, but this is a little bit of that air. And then if I were writing a book, this would be my thank you. All of these people on here, they have totally helped me. They're so generous with their information. you can get supplies. Their education have like education things that you can read. I've even been adding to it. Like 2 weeks ago, I took a class from VSU actually, and it was on beginning cutting gardens, and this Botanical Bites and Provisions in Fredericksburg. They talked a lot about if you're ready to sell. So this is an online Zoom course that you could look up, and I have never, sold my flowers, so if that's something you're interested in, they're a great resource for that. And they're just right over in Fredericksburg. But just know that this is just the people that have helped me, but there's so many resources out there. So no matter where you look, and I can tell you, everyone's so friendly. So ask questions, email, everybody's willing to help. So I know, like I said, this was very broad, and there's lots of little, details that we could go into, but I want to make sure that all your questions are answered, and we can walk the gardens if you want, but before we get up, we have something fun. We're going to give away some bouquets, and so I think Thomas, and then we'll do that, but do you guys have any questions first?
Yeah, let's do questions first.
Yes.
Could you repeat the name of that little bottle of drops you put in as a preservative, or?
Yes, it's actually it's C as in Charlie, VBN tablets.
CVBN.
Yeah. So, and I think there's various brands, but it's just it just makes your water like a holding solution.
And if I could add one thing to what you said about supporting people locally, I heartily support that support. But if you have shade, I've found that the things that I can grow in shade are wonderful additions as foliage to bouquets, like hosta leaves and ferns and things like that.
Yes, so. and you know what? That's such an excellent point, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because I specifically talked about annual plants out here, but and specific to flower farming, like where you're just having a cutting bed. But I mean, I walk around all around my garden, my perennial plants, my shade plants. I mean, Solomon seal, that lasts forever in a vase. It's so gorgeous. And I also have to say, the fun part too is experimenting. One of the things, and I think I put it in one of these bouquets, is like, I talked about cover crops, right? Well, buckwheat is a cover crop. And I was like, well gosh, look at how beautiful it is. It's kind of like that air, right? Well, how would it do in a vase? I'm constantly, cutting flowers, putting them in water, and just seeing how long they last. Guess what? Buckwheat lasts forever in your vase. So it's just, I feel like if you're a lifelong learner, this is like such the great thing to be in. There's always something to be learning. So definitely, the other thing I was told too, it's like, it's not natural to want to go, like you've planted your ornamental beds, and like it's hard to go in and cut flowers from your ornamental beds, especially if that's the view from your window, right? So a lot of times it's really good to locate your cutting garden where you can't see it. You'll be more inclined to cut. But if you're okay, like cutting in your ornamental beds, definitely, I mean, peonies, my gosh, right? Like they're so gorgeous. So again, I was specific to annual plants, so I'm so glad you pointed that out, because, I mean, really, just experiment, have fun. There's no right or wrong arrangement. I truly believe that. I mean, I'm like reading this book on the elements of floral style, but guys, I mean, if it makes you happy and smile, it's a great bouquet. And it doesn't have to be big. I mean, one flower, like, really? How gorgeous is that? I mean, how much better is doing dishes gonna be when that's sitting in front of you, right? Or that you wake up with this on your nightstand. So really the goal is to just have fun. It is a lot of work, and I can tell you, and all my friends know, like when it's hot and humid, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to go out there, right? It's so worth it. You're gonna have your grumbly moments, but in the end, this is what you're going for. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Can you talk more about the hardening off? I feel like I struggle with that, because is there like a rule of thumb of like how to do that, or how long it should take? I
know it is hard, and it kind of depends on if you're dealing with the cool season versus your warm season. So like these guys, like or these for example, the biggest thing to remember is that your house is probably at the most goes down to 65 degrees, right? So at night, if you're taking this outside, like you've decided, okay, it's ready to just stay overnight, if all of a sudden you're going to have a huge drop in temperature, like it's going from 65 and then like the next night it's going to be in the 30s, just bring your plants back in. It's like thinking about them just being so delicate. Anything that's going to be like this extreme jump for them is what you're trying to avoid. And so like if you're going from 60s to 50s, it's going to be okay, right? I can tell you that a lot of times I bring my plants in if like we're going to have some huge storm, because a lot of times even in this they'll just like blow over. But I understand what you're saying. I've learned some hard lessons. Like sometimes I forgot about them, and then I'm in the middle of the night just like, oh my gosh, you know, because again, you've like grown them from seed. It's like they have to live. This is so much work. And another thing too that makes me think of is have extra seed, because there's always some casualties, whether it's because of things I've forgotten or just they didn't germinate. Like not every cell here, you can see, didn't germinate. So having extra seeds and starting them again, and then when you transplant them out, you know, or you're hardening them off and you have a little incident, you still have more that you're able to start again. There's plenty of times where, and Thomas knows, like I was like, oh my gosh, I have no flowers, nothing germinated. And a lot of that is, again, talking to one another. One of the biggest things I learned about, I was struggling so hard with Snapdragons. I just could not get Snapdragons to germinate. Well, one of the tips was you know, they're cool season, so they're on heat mats, but if you put a cookie sheet down and put that Snapdragon on top of the cookie sheet, it just gives it that little extra coolness, and sure enough, they were germinating for me. So it is a lot of experimenting. It's a lot of, you know, successes and failures, but those failures are truly learning lessons, and that's why I say take detailed notes. So just think of it as you're trying hard to gently, you know, acclimate them, no extreme. So if you're going to put it out in full sun, then you're putting it out for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and you'll see them start to get scorched, or they're going to start to just really not look good, and then you're bringing them back in. If it's really gotten hot and humid, you're going to have to water them more than once in the day, because look at how little soil that is, so they'll just wilt faster. So does that kind of help? Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
What is the best thing you recommend to use cleaning your tools?
So I actually just use Dawn dish soap. That's what because I'm just not a fan of like the chemicals, but I know a lot of people use bleach. They use a teaspoon to a gallon of bleach, and they're just like, we'll use rags out here, dip it in, and you know, we'll clean our tools that way, or they'll put them in the buckets. Because I'm constantly cleaning my buckets, I don't let them sit. They're never really getting grimy, so I feel good about just using the dish soap, and I haven't had any trouble with disease or grossness in my buckets. So do I want to clean buckets all the time? No, but that's the benefit of kind of like staying on top of it. So yeah.
After you have made the arrangement, do you change the water in the other plant?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I know it was a mass that's so
Yes,
hard.
after you have made your arrangement, do you change the water?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't. And I've like experimented with it, and my flowers, I can get sometimes a week and a half, 2 weeks out of it. I'm not saying that's the right thing. I'm just saying I'm so busy all the time that I don't get to them, and because I'm so fortunate to always have a continual supply of flowers, I'm discarding and then going. But I know like my mother-in-law, she talks about changing the water every day and recutting the stems. That's really important. You want to recut it. And when you're making your vase, even though you've stripped and put your stuff in here, when you go to make your arrangements, and you would cut it anyways, because your stems are so long that you're making them all even, but you're recutting your stems. But if you're going to change your water, recut your stems. And sometimes it's hard because like the bigger arrangements, you know, I'm using floral tape across the vase and making them into like a grid, and that just holds my flowers better. And that can be so challenging when then you're trying to change the water out and stuff. So I feel like it's a personal preference with that. But if you do change your water, you know, use your flower food and recut your stems. So, yeah.
What are your thoughts about including perennials when you design your bed so that you've got a nice polyculture?
Okay, so that's another great thing that you're bringing up, because the challenge here is growing all like the different flowers in one bed, but these are annual plants. And while I'm thinking of it, be thinking about the nature of what you're growing. Your one and done plants you're gonna want at the end of your bed. But perennials, they want a forever home, right? And they can sometimes be really big. So you want to be thinking about, okay, where is that located in relation to my annual bed? What kind of shade is that going to be causing? And this is going to be a permanent feature. So how is that going to impact my paths? Just how I'm growing in general. But as far as like creating diversity, I mean, I love that I get to grow flowers in here intermixed with my vegetable plants. I mean, the cut flower thing, it's a little crazy because you don't really want your flowers to be pollinated because they're going into the vase. You want that longer vase life. But I mean, I'm always taking pictures of my pollinators. But they're coming in for the vegetable plants. I mean, it's great. I think diversity is excellent, but it's just keeping those things in mind. You definitely don't want to put something that's going to be like permanent in a bed that you're also doing your annual plants. And the same practices apply. Like if you can rotate your beds, that's great. Like we grew all of our cool season that was over there, we've moved them over there. And that just helps with your soil health too. But maybe it's that your beds are going to be, some beds are specific just to your perennial bed, perennial plants. And then you have beds that are specific to your annual plants. So, any other questions?
What is the name of the website for the landscape fabric that they have the
It's
Clover
gardenmats.com.
Garden Mat?
Yeah, and they were great. I think I got it in like, it was a new company to me. I think it's a small company. It was like out in 3 days. And it was just so glorious because this was after I had been like weeding and I thought, no, this is like, there's some things that you're like, I'm going to invest in this. This is like very helpful, and that landscape fabric is great. And it's also reusable. We roll our landscape fabric up and store it, and we use it the next season. So it's kind of, once you purchase it, I think you'll have it for 10 or more years if you take care of it. So, any other questions? No? Yeah.
What did you say you used in the winter for keeping your gardens good, the soil in that?
Cover crops, and we're always adding compost. Like out here, again, we've got a great team and they're making our compost. I don't have the material or the time to make my own compost, so you can get it at the facility. But after any time that we're done, like I'm gonna take like the cool season bed, you'll see. I left those more for you guys to be able to look at and to show you how cool season plants, they kind of struggle. Like, I mean, those Snapdragons are just limping along. But I will pull those out and I will add compost. And any beds that you never want your soil to just stay barren. You always want something to be growing in it because those roots are feeding those microorganisms. And so crimson clover is a cover crop that is so beautiful. It's like having a cut garden. The only thing is that right when it blooms, that's the best time to turn it under to then help, feed your soil. But it's about keeping that soil covered with, plants, and that's your cover crops. And like I said, Thomas is an expert on that too. So if you've got like real specific questions, talk with him. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, what was the name of that little tool you had?
Oh, it's a soil blocker. So, and it's great. It's great for your smaller seeds. And then they even have larger ones. For like, I couldn't soil block sunflower seeds because they're just bigger. But for me, I prefer to use the cells for my larger seeds just because it takes so much soil blocking material to do it. But definitely there's videos out there. I mean, it's just such a great tool and such a great way to get a lot of plants in a little bit of space. Any other questions?
Can you get those anywhere?
What?
Can you get those anywhere?
So I'm sure that you can. I haven't looked like on Amazon and stuff, but I got mine from the Gardener's Workshop, which is on your resource page, and she has videos and everything on how to use it. Again, Florette, the Gardener's Workshop, Johnny's, I mean, they are education companies as well. So everything that I've talked about, you're going to hear all on there. So, but I would definitely, it took me a little bit to get soil locking down, and you'll see, like, if you go on the social media blogs, people are like, this isn't working. Just keep at it. It works. Like it really, it works. So, any other questions, guys? Yeah.
Sorry, you mentioned one more thing at the end, a webinar or something you could watch. I thought you said
Oh, yes. Right, because so I'm always like wanting to learn, and VSU, Virginia State University, they did a beginning cutting garden, and it was a Zoom, and they had local farmers. It's Fred and Anita. They're hysterical, their sense of humor. And I would believe that it would be a link that you could, access.
One would hope. VSU is not as they're not as prompt as getting videos on their website.
Okay.
But VSU is our partner sister university, and they do a lot of not just flowers, but they do a lot of good educational programming.
Yeah, so it was through them, and they had these 2 flower farmers that are in Fredericksburg, and it's Botanical Bites and Provision. They're in Fredericksburg, and I even wrote it down here so that you can come up and take a picture of it, so that you can get their Instagram feed. But they're so friendly, and again, if you're interested in selling, that was the best information I got. Like, it's way over my head right now. I would definitely have to research it. But I would reach out to them. And again, like I said, everyone that I've ever reached out to, they're just so nice and so willing to share. I mean, I'm going to tell you, Bloom's Flower Farm, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but like I was struggling out here, and I had some questions, and I reached out to her, who I've never met before, by the way. And in like the worst time, right? When they're at their busiest, like end of July, beginning of August. Flower farmers are crazy. And she was so nice and sent me such detailed emails and stuff, and I thought, this woman has 5 kids and is doing this flower farm, and she just spent probably an hour writing me an email, right? So don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, I really do think this is it's a lot of hard work, but it's so rewarding, and everybody wants to help everyone. So I would definitely, even if you reached out to them, VSU, I bet they would supply the link for you. So, anything else?
I'm just going to do a shameless plug for Sarah.
Okay.
She lives near me, and her bouquets are beautiful, and they're only $10.
Yes, right? Like, I mean, it's just so awesome. So, but that's the best part, because I went and picked some up, and we're going to give them away. So,
Yep.
I'm going to have Thomas help with that.